Hey everyone, welcome to another Facebook Live. It's Friday. Uh, as you can see, maybe see out my windows, it's nice wintry weather here in New Hampshire the past 2 days. Some snow and freezing rain, just pretty miserable. I'd rather it just snow or not snow and decide one way or the other. But yeah, it's part of living in the Northeast, I guess. So not much is going on with me. Just same old stuff, trucking along. I just threw some yummy liver in the dehydrator. So I'm making liver jerky. I've made this once before, which I was super excited about. It's quite tasty. It still tastes like liver, but I've marinated the liver in beef liver in Primal Kitchen no soy teriyaki overnight, and now it's going in dehydrator for a few hours, and in a few hours I'll have some nice liver jerky to munch on, which I'm pretty excited about. But it's not really what I want to talk to you about today. What I want to talk to you about today is deciphering your the health advice that you get and read online or wherever you tend to see health-related topics discussed, whether it's the news or magazines or Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. Because the number one complaint that I get from clients or people that I talk to or interact with is like they don't know what advice they should listen to, because you just hear contradictory things, right? You hear, eggs are good for you. No, eggs are bad for you. Saturated fat in food raises your LDL, which causes heart disease. But then you hear people say that your LDL has nothing to do with causing heart disease. If you're an athlete, you'll hear that you need to consume carbohydrates all the time. And you'll hear people say that you don't need any carbohydrates, you can perform just as well. And the contradictions in the health sphere go on and on and on and on and on. And there's very kind of few things that we know of that are set in stone kind of piece of advice that people universally agree on. And so you often hear things, going back and forth, right? There are some things that we know that, like, hey, getting as much sleep as you possibly can is probably good for you. Staying away from or limiting sugar as much as you possibly can is great for you. Not eating processed foods is probably a good idea. Staying away from things like trans fats and those types of things are probably a very good idea. Those types of things are kind of universally accepted, but even things like vegetables is somehow come into controversy, where you have people saying that these things that are compounds that happen to be in vegetables can be bad for your health, and you shouldn't really consume a lot of vegetables, and etc. Right? So there's a lot of just back and forth in the health sphere, and it's just come up for me the past few days because I've watched a few videos on YouTube from quote unquote health experts. I've also watched, I've read a couple articles that have come across my inbox around saturated fat being good and bad. I've also listened to a couple podcasts where, someone is trying to understand why their performance really sucks, and they are, advocating or going down the path of getting all this testing done, but yet they're working out twice a day and eating one meal a day and trying to figure out why they're not performing as well. So there's just a lot of back and forth, and I am the most anti-dogmatic person out there. I don't believe in one set diet. I don't believe in one set way of doing things. I don't, force clients into a very fixed mindset, or I try not to have a fixed mindset myself. So I'm very open to trying things and experimenting, especially when it comes to clients, to figure out what works best for them. And so, going back to the whole topic of the video about knowing how to decipher these health claims, whether what's good or what's bad or what's right or what's wrong, is most likely there's never going to be one answer, set in stone answer to a lot of these things. So the best way to decipher questions or contradictions is to use yourself. Do what's called a N=1 experiment on yourself, right? So if you have, for example, if you have high cholesterol, and you've heard that eating eggs is going to contribute to your high cholesterol because eggs are thought to have a lot of cholesterol in them, and you're unsure whether you should cut out eggs from your diet or whether you should keep them in, there's a very easy way to do this, right? You have a blood work from eating eggs that shows you have high cholesterol. And if you want to see whether removing eggs from your diet lowers your cholesterol, well, take the eggs out. Remove the eggs from your diet for 3 months, 4 months, around there, and go get some more blood work done and see what if it helps. Did it lower cholesterol? Did it not lower cholesterol? Maybe for some people, it would lower their cholesterol. I'm not sure. It might. Most of the evidence that I've read and I believe today shows that the amount of cholesterol that you consume via your diet makes up a very small percentage of the overall cholesterol that's in your body. So taking it out is probably going to have very little impact on your total cholesterol, maybe none. But for some, it might have a big impact on you. I'm not sure, right? But there's easy way to figure that out, right? Same thing with like the carbohydrate debate. Do you need carbohydrates to perform exercise? I say if you're going out for a 30-minute walk, no, you don't need them. If you are going to do some intervals for an hour-long exercise session, it might be useful. I know for myself, I've done high intensity exercise without carbohydrates on a very low carb diet, and I've done it with carbohydrates. And I've spent enough time to know that I am very well fat adapted and can utilize fat very well. So that's not a question here. And I just feel like I can perform a lot better when I have carbohydrates and the exercise is relatively intense. But other people seem to be fine. They seem to perform certainly well without the carbohydrates. And the only way that I can tell you whether you're going to do better with carbohydrates or without carbohydrates is for you to try it yourself. And it's a very simple thing to do. Do an exercise session, without consuming carbohydrates for, a day or so beforehand at a relatively high intensity, see how that goes, and then do the same session the next week with carbohydrates, either, as the meal before or the day before, and see how that goes. Did you perform better? Did you feel like you had more oomph? Did the results actually show that you were able to do more reps, or you felt stronger, or your wattage on the bike or the rower was increased, or how did that go? And sure, there's other confounding factors there, right? You be more well slept, or whatever. You had some caffeine beforehand, but try to keep the parameters pretty much the same, and you'll have a very good idea of how things go. So, when it comes to deciphering advice, the best advice I can give you as trying to figure out what is right and what's wrong, or who you should listen to and who you shouldn't listen to, is just take in the advice, understand what they're saying. Does it make sense? Or is it backed by legitimate research? If it is, and you want to try it out, then try it out. see if it works, see how your body reacts to it. Everyone's going to be different. So you just have to try it and see how it goes. And there's probably very little negative consequence to doing so, right? These short little experiments that, in the context of your life, 3 months is a very small amount of time, is going to have little negative impact if it is bad for you. And you'll probably know pretty much right away whether things are going south, right? For some of these things, like your athletic performance or things like that, sleep, etc. Right? Other things they're hard to tell. Like if your eggs raises your cholesterol, lowers your cholesterol, you have to give it a little bit of time, and you can't tell yourself. You have to go get some blood work. But there's ways to get it done, right? So that's really the message today. Like I said, the number one complaint that I hear from, or question, or comment that I get from clients and people I talk to is that I just don't know who to listen to or what is right and what is wrong. And only you can, unfortunately, decipher that information yourself. And there's very easy ways to do that. And that's a lot of times when people ask me, or when I'm working with a client and they're questioning something about what we're doing or what we should do or whatnot, right? I do these little self-experiments, right? And sometimes I do it without them knowing, right? I might say, hey, this week before your exercise session, just throw in some carbs and see, how do things work? Versus, last week when we did it fasted. Just kind of under the covers, figure these things out for them. But I'm always here to help and help people, do these types of things and figure these types of things out. So if you want help trying to decipher health advice or trying to figure out which direction you want to go with your health, I'm always here to help. So reach out, direct message me, comments in the video. You know how to get in touch with me, always the same ways. And with that, I'll sign off for this week's Facebook Live, and I'll be back next week for another topic. Who knows what it'll be? We'll see what happens. And with that, I hope everyone has a good weekend and stay healthy. Talk to you next week.